There are paintings whose meaning is a mystery. There are painters who led mysterious lives. But only rarely, very rarely, do we encounter an utterly mysterious painting by an utterly mysterious painter. That's the case with The Tempest, the masterpiece by Giorgio de Castelfranco, better known to you and me as Ďorđoне. The Tempest hangs in the Accademia Gallery in Venice, a city packed with great pictures. But so precious is The Tempest that they wouldn't even let us into the same room to film it.
This is an icon of Western culture and is possibly the best conserved of Ďorđone's works still in existence. Entire books have been written about the content of this painting, which can be interpreted at various different levels.
For 500 years, The Tempest has led its many admirers on a wild goose chase. To this day, there is no agreement about what we're actually witnessing when we look at it. Who is she? Who is he? What are they doing? And where are they? Although Ďorđone is considered perhaps Venice's greatest painter, he wasn't actually from Venice. He came from the Venetian mainland, the Veneto as it's called, a land of dark hills, mysterious mists, and silhouetted castles, whose poetic presence always haunts the backgrounds of his art. Castelfranco, where young Giorgio was born in 1477, is a pretty medieval city, surrounded by a moat. We know Giorgio came from a humble family, that he was tall and imposing, which is how he got his nickname, Ďorđoне, Big George. Big George's earliest work in Castelfranco is now in ruins. It's a puzzling frieze of musical instruments and astronomical diagrams painted in the house of a local nobleman. Like so much of Ďorđone's art, the Castelfranco frieze seems to speak to us in riddles. At an early age, he left Castelfranco for Venice, where he quickly made his mark with these mysterious fantasies filled with poetic longing for the Veneto. But there's a problem. We know Ďorđone's art was revolutionary, that he had many followers and was much copied, but we don't know exactly what he painted. None of his work is signed, not even The Tempest.
Unlike other painters of Renaissance Italy, very little is known about him, except for the date of his death and a few dates of some of his paintings. But when we know the date, the painting is lost, and when we have the painting, we have no date. With one exception, there is only one painting in Vienna, Laura, which is dated on the back of it at 1506. So it's a very mysterious painter.
We know almost nothing about Ďorđone's life. We know that he lived in this square in Venice, that he played the lute beautifully, that he was very handsome, that women liked him, and that, perhaps as a result, he died young. It seems that his handsome looks and his beautiful lute playing brought him to the attention of a certain Venetian lady. She caught the plague. Ďorđone, while conducting this illicit affair with her, caught it too. He died in 1510, aged a little over 30, but he'd done enough. he'd changed the course of art. Like no one before him, Ďorđone was to feed the Venetian appetite for melancholy ambiguity. It's an appetite the inhabitants of Venice seem to inherit with their mother's milk. The city itself, a floating labyrinth decaying before our eyes, is a puzzle waiting to be solved.
People like to look up and discover in the same place different things that they have possibly never seen before. This happens even to us Venetians. Whenever we look up or look around, we discover something new.
We'd know more about Ďorđone, a lot more, if what he painted on the outside of this unnaturally blank building hadn't crumbled into the water. This used to be the warehouse of the German merchants in Venice. Once it was completely covered with frescoes by Ďorđone. Today, it's Venice's main post office. And only this tiny decayed fragment remains. The Tempest was painted just before Ďorđone's horribly premature death in 1510. We know it was probably commissioned by Gabriele Vendramin, a member of one of Venice's most powerful families. This is Vendramin as an old man, painted by Titian, who was always thought to have been Ďorđone's pupil. But notice the cross in this painting. It's terribly important. This cross, which still exists behind this golden door, was thought to contain a fragment of the actual cross on which Jesus was crucified. Yet one day, to the city's horror, it was dropped accidentally into this canal in Venice and sank to the bottom. No one could find it until Gabrielle's famed ancestor, Andrea Vendramin, plunged into the water and fished it out. It was a miracle, or so the Venetians believed. Their cross was safe. The miracle of the cross gave the Vendramin family great fame in Venice, though you wouldn't know it today. I tracked down the family palace and found it to be a simple hardware store. Looking around at the nuts and the bolts, it was impossible to imagine that in this building, Ďorđone's Tempest was to hang, largely unseen, for 400 years. We don't know how Gabriele Vendramin came to acquire the Tempest. He probably commissioned it directly from the painter. 20 years after Ďorđone's death, a visitor to Vendramin's palace remembers seeing a little landscape with a storm, with a gypsy and a soldier by Giorgio of Castelfranco. Already, the Tempest's real meaning was lost. So perhaps it never had one.
Tempest is a very mysterious painting, and this is proved by the very fact that there are 30 to 40 different interpretations of it. One of them being that it has no meaning at all. This is one interpretation like the others. From some contemporary sources, we gather that the sort of patrons like Gabriele Vendramin, who owned the painting in the 1520s, loved to have guests in their homes and to show them some paintings like this and to play with them whether they would understand or not. This is the reason why many scholars, including myself, vast majority of scholars, including myself, believe that a meaning was intended, whether we are able to understand it or not, but that the meaning was intended.
Vendramin never sold the Tempest. He left a will forbidding his heirs from selling it too. For the next 300 years, hardly anyone saw it. One visitor to Venice who did was the poet Lord Byron. It became his favourite painting and obsessed him. Byron believed the Tempest was a portrait of Ďorđone himself, with his family. "'Tis but a portrait of his son and wife and self," he wrote. but Byron had a taste for other people's wives, and he fell in love with the woman he took to be Ďorđone's spouse. Such a woman, love in life, he drawled. In 1932, the Italian state finally bought the painting, and it's hung in the Accademia ever since, daring all comers to guess its true meaning. Interpreting The Tempest has become one of the great cottage industries of art history. But somewhere out there, there's a solution. And that solution must lie in the painting itself. Guess what? I think I found it. So what do we see in The Tempest? The setting looks much like Castelfranco itself, underneath a stormy sky with lightning in it. There's a beautiful mother suckling a baby, and a most handsome young man, tall, finely dressed, who seems to be her partner. So was Byron right? Is this Ďorđone and his family? No, it isn't. Although we know so little about Ďorđone, we do amazingly know what he looked like. He painted a self-portrait in which he pretends to be King David slaying the giant Goliath. Not all the picture has survived, but the face that remains is clearly not the young man in The Tempest. So who is he? And was Byron right or wrong about what he said?
The soldier is in fact a comrade of the sock. If you look at his socks, you will see that they are different colors. The comrades of the sock were private associations very common in the Venice of that time, of young hedonists who got together to act plays, enjoy themselves, accompany wedding processions.
But just because the chap in The Tempest is dressed as a fashionably louche Venetian, it doesn't mean that's what he represents. Venetian art liked to set things in the present, to take the Bible or the tales of the gods out of the distant past and make them real. Oh, how they liked their costumes, just as Byron does. Also hanging in the Accademia is this huge masterpiece by one of Ďorđone's descendants, Veronese. It's called The Feast in the House of Levi, and it too is a painting with a checkered history. The Feast in the House of Levi isn't its original name. Its first name was The Last Supper, and what it actually shows is the most famous dinner ever eaten. We don't recognize it these days because Christ and his disciples are wearing contemporary clothes, and because many of the characters in the painting aren't really supposed to be there. There's no mention in the Bible of dwarfs and jesters attending the Last Supper. So could The Tempest, like Veronese's Feast at the House of Levi, be a secret religious painting? Professor Salvador Setis believes it is.
What I did is basically to read all the literature on the painting and to see what is meaningful in the painting and what is not, which means the man, the woman, the child, the columns which are there, a serpent which is hidden in a bush, the lightning in the sky. But since the lightning was widely used as a symbol of God in Ďorđone's time, I assumed that there was an equivalence between God and the lightning. And it's a definite possibility that that actually the tempest represents Adam and Eve with the first-born child, Cain, actually, and the serpent would be an allusion to the original sin. So all different elements would be explained.
But there's a major flaw in this surprising Adam and Eve theory. When the painting was cleaned, that serpent which Professor Setis claims to have located under this bush turned out to be nothing more than the root of a tree. Can this really be the Garden of Eden? I've looked at it on many occasions for many hours and never once felt any religious atmosphere. Over at the academia, they prefer the simplest of all explanations.
Which of the many interpretations of the Tempest's meaning do you think is probably closest to the truth?
Nessuna.
None of them. None of them, none of them. I like Michele's one best of all, a storm with a gypsy who is feeding her child and a shepherd.
So everybody else has been wrong.
I don't know.
If the painting isn't Ďorđone's family, if it doesn't mean nothing at all, if it isn't a religious image, what can it be? Well, there is one area in which the artists of Venice specialized and took particular delight: the stories of the gods, mythology. Above all, a lot of fun was had enjoying the antics of Zeus, the god of thunder, a master of disguise whose appetite for good-looking mortals was Clintonesquely insatiable. Here's Ďorđone's pupil, Titian, showing Zeus disguised as a shower of gold coins, making love to the surprised Danae. Zeus had a different disguise for every affair. To seduce the nymph Callisto, he took the form of another woman, Diana the Huntress, a stimulating example of girl-on-girl mythology. To make it with Io, he came down as a barely visible cloud of excitement. And it wasn't just girls he went for. Attracted by young Ganymede, Zeus turned into an eagle and had his violent way with the boy. That lightning in the background of the Tempest must surely indicate the presence of Zeus, the god of thunder and thrower of lightning bolts. But he's not seducing the woman in the picture, is he? She seems to be the partner of the handsome young man. So what is Zeus doing here? After 500 years of mystery, I think I've cracked Ďorđone's code. There is a story, and only one story, which fits snugly with what we see in The Tempest. It's outlined here by Homer in the Odyssey, the most celebrated of all classical poems. It concerns Demeter, the goddess of fertility, who made things grow. This is her, with her clothes on, but I think Ďorđone's painted her in The Tempest with her clothes off. According to Homer, Demeter met a handsome mortal at a wedding called Iasion. Even though she was a goddess and he was human, they made love in a ploughed field and had a baby. That baby was Plautus, the god of wealth. Zeus, Demeter's brother, and complicatedly her former lover, who often enjoyed the embrace of mortals himself, was so angered by this illicit relationship between Demeter and Iasion that he killed Iasion with a lightning bolt, smote him with his bright thunder, says Homer. The Tempest shows the moment just before Zeus's deadly revenge. That's why the atmosphere is so charged. Demeter has given birth to the god of wealth, but Iasion is about to be hit by a deadly thunderbolt. His crime? He was a mortal who made love to a god. And we're like the audience at a Christmas pantomime, who can see what's going to happen and who want to shout, "Look out! Look out!" Once you know the picture's overall meaning, every little detail falls into place. Demeter's unexpectedly blonde hair, there's not too many blondes in Venice, is described by Homer, who calls her fair-tressed Demeter, golden-haired Demeter. Poor Iasion has a broken column behind him. That's bad luck. Broken columns, even in cemeteries today, represent a life cut short. In classical art, Plautus, the god of wealth, was often shown as a baby boy in the arms of a woman. But the cleverest clue, so easy to overlook, is the mysterious white bird perched on the roof behind. One of Demeter's attributes, the things that appear in pictures next to her so you know it's her, is a crane. This beautiful white bird flies south in the spring to rear its young, so it represents fertility like her. But the crane has another role in mythology. It's renowned for standing on one leg, so during the Renaissance they believed that in its other foot it held a stone, and if it ever fell asleep, that stone would drop, hit it on the other leg and wake it up. And so the crane became a symbol of vigilance. Always look around you. Be prepared for what happens next. It's exactly the kind of message that a rich man like Gabriel Vendramin, whom Plautus has so favoured, would keep on the walls of his study as a constant reminder of the fickleness of wealth. Here today, gone tomorrow. The tempest is a warning. Watch out, because you never know where or when the lightning may strike. It's a good message for Gabriel Vendramin. It's a good message for all of us. There are a million stories in the world of art. This has been just one of them.